Rada gives an outline of the books he bought, but it is in the report of his fellow traveler, Miguel de Loarca, that we find a detailed list. One set of books, of which he bought up to 7 titles, dealt with physical and administrative geography. The most important of these books was a general geography, the Guangyu, that the Jesuits, Matteo Ricci and Martino Martini, will also use some years later. It contained a general map of China and a whole set of provincial maps, together with all kinds of statistics, general or provincial. 5 of the chapters in Rada's report closely follow the 1572 edition of the Guangyu, first published in 1555. From it, as can be seen in this graphic, he took the population numbers for each province, as well as the physical and administrative geography of China, detailing, as the Guangyu does, the total number of cities for each province and their different administrative levels, as well as the taxpayers and military men for each of these units. To read his sources, he was certainly helped by a cultivated Zhanglei, because the translation of Chinese numbers is quite a task. A couple of history books also served him to write 2 other chapters of his report dedicated to history. One was a book on legends that Rada reproduces in his report, albeit dismissing them as foolish lies, and the other was probably what the Chinese call analytic histories, the kind of books that were available in large numbers and that were in fact little more than an expanded chronology of Chinese emperors. Rada used it to draw up a draft outline of Chinese history, where the main dynasties are clearly recognizable. The other set of books that Rada bought had to do with astrology, astronomy, and divination, which he was particularly interested in, as we have seen. Chinese bookshops had a great array of books on these subjects, which had become highly popular during the Ming Dynasty. Rada bought some titles on judiciary astrology, about the movement of the stars and their effects on Earth. But he also bought many other titles more specifically Chinese, like books on physiognomy, that infers an individual's future based on their face, chiromancy, that foretells the future through palm reading, and books about dreams. In a cultural world so centered on civil service examinations, there was a real market for the publishing of collections of dreams. One such book compiled the dreams of those candidates achieving the top grades in examinations from 1371 to 1571. It was reprinted several times. Printed using woodblocks and with lavish drawings, the book portrayed very graphically the dreams of those sitting for the examinations. Dreams of the banquets that they will be offered when ranking first on the exams. Dreams of the medicinal help that will sustain them when falling exhausted. Dreams of the official residents and guards that will come with their posts. And dreams of the sudden death of their fiercest competitors, whose heads will be presented to them on a plate. 2 other books in this section of the list were clearly dangerous. One of them dealt with the use of astrology to cure sickness, a practice that in 16th century Castile was already banned by the Church. The other, a collection of magic spells, was still worse, because spells and incantations were directly persecuted by the Inquisition for their relation with superstition and sorcery. Rada also bought at least 1 book on arithmetic, even if he thoroughly despised Chinese mathematics, claiming that the Chinese were utterly ignorant and knew nothing about geometry or arithmetic and were unable to reckon beyond simple addition, subtraction, and multiplication. As for Chinese science, he bluntly dismisses it, saying that the Chinese were incapable of attaining anything more than the smell or shadow of the substance. He allowed one exception, however, which was medicine. He was certainly struck by Chinese herbal medicine, because herbal pharmacies were quite common and had an obvious presence on the streets. China had a very long tradition of illustrated pharmacopoeias, starting in the 5th century BC. From the 10th century on, the invention of printing increased the production of pharmacopoeias exponentially. And even if Europeans were incapable of understanding Chinese medicine, they did pick up on their pharmacopoeias from the very beginning. Although despising Chinese medicine as utterly simple, Rada admits that they are excellent herbalists and that they have books like our Dioscorides. Pediatric clinics that were also to be seen everywhere also aroused Rada's attention, and he bought a book about how the child develops month by month in its mother womb. The publishing of medical books grew steadily during the Ming. 244 were on display when Rada's expedition went to China. Books on childcare were quite common and were probably meant as household reference books. Rada also bought a couple of books on religion, mostly legends about gods, which he used in the chapter of his book related to religion. Even so, 2 books on religion is a scant number for a friar. He also bought a couple of books about Chinese laws. These texts were widely available because, as we have already seen, the Ming, and especially its founder Hongwu, promoted a widespread diffusion of Ming's legal ordinances. Rada bought yet another big set of books related to social life. He used a couple of them in his report, one on architecture and another on dress. He also bought books on music, especially about musical instruments, and books on Chinese games, with a special mention of chess. There were books about mourning and probably tombs, which had aroused his particular interest. There were books on agriculture, probably the almanac genre, which flourished in 16th century China. He also bought a book about how to write letters, which probably appealed to his keen interest on the courtesy rules that interlinked the Chinese elites. Booklets of a few leaves showing the proper form for writing various letters and petitions were quite usual among late Ming printers. In total, Rada bought 100 Chinese books. This was a large enough quantity to alarm the Chinese officials that trailed behind the expedition and suspected that with so many books the foreigners would also carry away the secrets of the land. But Rada was a humanist, and he knew perfectly well the cultural value embodied in these books. When the viceroy tried to stop him, he turned a deaf ear and secured his books on board his returning ship.